Hey guys! Tonight we're taking a journey back to the scorching sands and towering monuments of ancient Egypt. Picture the colossal pyramids, the gleaming temples, the majestic Nile flowing through a land steeped in mystique and unimaginable power. At the very apex of this civilization stood the pharaoh, a figure not merely a king, but a living god, the embodiment of divine order on earth. Sounds pretty amazing, right? Absolute power, divine adoration, eternal legacy. But here's the cheeky reality check if you were an ancient Egyptian pharaoh. You probably wouldn't survive this, with your expectations intact, or perhaps even your life, given the political landscape. Tonight, we're going to peek behind the golden mask and uncover why being a pharaoh was far more disturbing and complex than the serene images on temple walls suggest. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. From the moment you ascended the throne, you'd be instantly transformed from a mere mortal into a divine being, a living manifestation of Horus, the sky god, and later, linked with Ra, the sun god. This wasn't just a title, it was the fundamental basis of your authority, and the very essence of your existence. You were not just the ruler of Egypt. You were the cosmic pivot, responsible for maintaining Mayat, the divine order, balance, and justice in the universe. This meant that every flood of the Nile, every successful harvest, every military victory, and even the very rising of the sun, was attributed to your divine influence. It's like being the CEO of the universe, with all the responsibility and none of the days off. This divine status came with immense pressure. You weren't allowed to show weakness, doubt, or personal flaws. Your public persona had to be one of unwavering perfection, wisdom, and absolute control. Every gesture, every pronouncement, every ritual you performed was imbued with sacred significance. You'd participate in elaborate ceremonies, dressed in regal attire, wearing symbols of power like the double crown uniting Upper and Lower Egypt, and carrying the crook and flail, symbols of kingship and divine authority. Imagine having to perform perfectly, flawlessly, day in and day out, knowing that the spiritual well-being of an entire nation rested on your shoulders. Beneath this glittering, divine facade. However, you were still just a human being. You would feel hunger, pain, fear, and desire. You would make mistakes, experience disappointments, and suffer illnesses. The tension between your divine public role and your very human private reality would be a constant, gnawing burden, this duality. The divine king with human flaws, was the unsettling core of the pharaonic experience. You were literally seen as a god walking among men, but you also had to use the royal toilet. It's a bit of a tricky balance, isn't it? One mainstream historical fact that highlights this divine status is the pharaoh's role as the chief priest of all cults. Unlike later monotheistic religions, the pharaoh was not just a protector of the gods. He was considered the direct link between humanity and the divine realm. He performed the most important rituals and made offerings on behalf of the entire nation, ensuring the gods were pleased and Ma'at was upheld. Every temple in Egypt ultimately operated under your authority. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that even the pharaoh's personal bodily fluids were sometimes considered sacred. There are instances where remnants, perhaps from royal waste or secretions, were believed to have magical or protective qualities when used in certain rituals. Imagine your ancient Egyptian version of a flu shot, involving something rather unsanitary. It's a testament to the extreme extent of their deification. Historians still argue whether the concept of the divine pharaoh was genuinely believed by the populace as literal godhood, or if it was primarily a political and ideological construct designed to legitimize absolute power and maintain social order. Was it faith? Or just really good propaganda, either way? You were trapped in a persona of perfection, with every human imperfection a dangerous secret you had to meticulously conceal. So, you were a living god, yet a very human one, burdened by the immense pressure of your divine role. But your personal life, particularly your romantic and familial relationships, would be shaped by a custom that seems incredibly disturbing to modern sensibilities: incestuous royal marriages. The drive to maintain a pure, untainted bloodline led to practices that were not just strange, but often had profound and negative consequences for the royal family's health and stability. Imagine your marriage prospects. Unlike ordinary mortals, you couldn't simply choose a spouse based on affection or alliance with a foreign power, though that also happened. Your primary consort, your great royal wife, was often your full sister, or even a half-sister, sometimes. You might even marry your own daughter. This wasn't seen as depraved by ancient Egyptian standards, but as a necessary and divine act, mimicking the gods themselves like Osiris and Isis, who were siblings and spouses. The belief was that the divine essence of kingship resided within the royal bloodline, and to dilute it with outside blood would weaken the pharaoh's power and the cosmic order. It's like having a family tree that's less of a tree and more of a very tangled shrub, all wrapped up in itself. This practice, while religiously justified, carried significant biological risks. You, as a pharaoh, might suffer from congenital defects and genetic disorders that arose from generations of inbreeding. Weakened immune systems, skeletal deformities, and a higher susceptibility to various illnesses were common consequences. While we can't definitively diagnose every pharaoh, modern genetic analysis of some royal mummies has begun to confirm these health issues. Imagine being a divine ruler, but constantly battling the physical frailties passed down through your own pure lineage, beyond the biological. These marriages created incredibly complex and often fraught family dynamics. Your sister wife was not just your spouse, she was a powerful political figure in her own right, often from the very same immediate family as your rivals for power. This meant that while there might be a strange familiarity, there was also a constant undercurrent of political maneuvering, suspicion, and personal drama within the very heart of the royal family. It's like living in a reality TV show where everyone is related, and the stakes are literally life and death. One mainstream historical fact that chillingly exemplifies this practice is the marriage of Tutankhamun to his half-sister, Ankhesenamun. Modern DNA analysis of Tutankhamun's mummy has revealed that his parents were full siblings, and he himself suffered from a range of physical ailments, including bone necrosis and a clubfoot, likely exacerbated by his inbred lineage. His short, difficult life is a stark testament to the biological cost of maintaining divine purity through incest. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that the Egyptian word for sister could also simply be a term of endearment for wife, which has led to some scholarly debate about the true extent of royal incest in every documented case. However, the archaeological and genetic evidence in many instances leaves little doubt that full sibling marriages were indeed practiced. Imagine trying to decipher ancient family trees when sister might not always mean sister. It's like a linguistic puzzle with very high-stakes implications. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for royal incest was purely religious, mimicking the gods, or also intensely political, preventing outside noble families from gaining influence through marriage, or a complex intertwining of both. Regardless, for you, as a pharaoh, your marriage bed was less about personal affection and more about the weighty demands of divine lineage, a heavy burden that might lead to profound physical and emotional distress. So, your family life was often a disturbing tangle of duty and genetic peril. But beyond the confines of the royal family, your very existence as pharaoh was defined by absolute power, often wielded ruthlessly. You were the ultimate authority, the lawgiver, the judge, and the supreme commander. And with this immense, unchecked power came the chilling capacity for arbitrary and often cruel decisions that profoundly impacted the lives of millions. Imagine the scale of your authority. Every person in Egypt, from the highest-ranking vizier to the lowliest peasant, was, in theory, your servant. You owned all the land, controlled all resources, and dictated all policy. If you decided that an entire city should be razed, it would be. If you decreed that thousands of laborers should spend their lives building a monument to your glory, it would be done, regardless of the human cost. There were no democratic checks and balances, no independent judiciary to question your will. Your word was law, backed by the might of your army and the religious belief in your divinity. It's like being the ultimate benevolent dictator. Except the benevolent part was entirely optional and often overlooked. This absolute power meant that even minor slights or perceived threats could be met with extreme brutality. Disloyalty, conspiracy, or even simple incompetence in your court could result in swift and horrifying punishment. Officials could be exiled, tortured, or executed without trial, their families often suffering the consequences alongside them. The pharaoh's wrath was a very real, very terrifying concept, a force that could destroy lives and lineages in an instant. Imagine trying to navigate a court where one wrong look could send you to the dungeons. Your building projects, those magnificent monuments that define ancient Egypt today, were often achieved through a combination of organized labor and coercive force. While some workers were skilled craftsmen, many were conscripted peasants or even prisoners of war, forced to toil under harsh conditions, facing grueling physical demands and strict discipline. Their lives were expendable in the grand scheme of erecting your eternal resting place, the pyramids. For all their grandeur, are also monuments to unimaginable human effort and, at times, suffering. One mainstream historical fact that chillingly demonstrates this ruthless power is the punishment meted out during the harem conspiracy against Ramesses III, when a plot to assassinate the pharaoh was uncovered. Not only were the conspirators, including high-ranking officials and royal family members, brutally executed, but even their names were systematically erased from records and their tombs defaced, an act known as damnatio memoriae. This was an attempt to obliterate their very existence from memory and the afterlife, showcasing the pharaoh's absolute authority over life, death, and even eternal remembrance. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some pharaohs were known to hold audience with their favorite pets or even inanimate objects, speaking to them as if they were sentient beings. Perhaps a strange outlet for their immense power and isolation. Imagine being the most powerful man on earth, but your closest confidant is your pet monkey. It's a lonely at the top kind of situation. Historians still argue whether the perceived cruelty of some pharaohs was genuinely due to tyrannical personality, or if it was simply a reflection of the brutal political realities of the ancient world, where such displays of absolute power were deemed necessary for maintaining control and deterring dissent. Was it true villainy, or just pragmatism in a harsh world? Regardless, as Pharaoh. Your decisions held the ultimate sway, and the well-being of your subjects was entirely subject to your sometimes terrifying and often arbitrary will. Your absolute power came with heavy responsibilities, but it also afforded you a life of unimaginable opulence. This brings us to the lavish lifestyles and deadly indulgences that often characterized a pharaoh's existence. While you commanded immense wealth and enjoyed luxuries far beyond the wildest dreams of your subjects, this extravagance often came at a hidden cost, a life of excess that paradoxically contributed to your own ill health and early demise. Imagine your daily life in the palace, every whim catered to by a vast retinue of servants, scribes, chefs, and entertainers. Your wardrobe would be filled with the finest linen, intricately pleated and adorned with precious jewels. Your meals would be a feast for the senses, an endless parade of rich meats, exotic fruits, sweet pastries, and copious amounts of wine and beer. You'd recline on luxurious furniture, breathe air scented with rare incense, and be entertained by musicians and dancers. It's like living in a permanent, ancient five-star resort, but with more golden sarcophagi. However, this life of indulgence was far from healthy. Your diet, while varied, was often extremely rich and lacked balance. Historical and archaeological evidence, particularly from the study of royal mummies, suggests many pharaohs suffered from obesity, heart disease, and diabetes, likely due to an excess of rich foods, sugars like honey and dates, and fermented beverages. Imagine being a divine ruler, but your biggest battle is against a growing waistline and clogged arteries. Beyond diet, personal hygiene, while elaborate, also had its quirks. While you'd have access to perfumes and oils, some practices, like the use of certain cosmetics, remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, though that was more common for the masses than royals. But some cosmetic ingredients were toxic, or the close confinement within palace walls could lead to other health issues. Dental health was particularly poor for many pharaohs, with evidence of severe tooth decay and abscesses, likely caused by a diet high in sugary fruits and bread that often contained abrasive sand particles from grinding stones. A toothache, in ancient Egypt, could easily turn into a life-threatening infection. The constant stress of maintaining ma'at, political intrigue, and ruling a vast empire would also take its toll. Despite the outward calm, the inner life of a pharaoh would be filled with anxiety and pressure. This chronic stress, combined with the physical indulgences, would further weaken your constitution and contribute to a shorter lifespan. One mainstream historical fact that underscores these deadly indulgences is the evidence of atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, found in several royal mummies, including those of Pharaoh Merneptah and potentially Tutankhamun. This condition, a hallmark of modern heart disease, suggests a diet rich in fats and sugars, a direct consequence of their lavish eating habits. It's a stark reminder that even divine rulers couldn't escape the consequences of poor dietary choices. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some pharaohs were known to consume a variety of exotic and sometimes questionable medicinal concoctions, often involving bizarre ingredients. In an attempt to cure ailments or enhance their vitality, imagine your royal physician prescribing a drink made from ground-up beetles or a crocodile's toe. It's a testament to their desperation and the rudimentary nature of ancient medicine. Historians still argue whether the high incidence of certain diseases among pharaohs was primarily due to their luxurious but unhealthy diets, or if it was more a consequence of genetic predispositions from incestuous marriages, or a combination of both factors. Either way, your life of unparalleled luxury was subtly, but surely, killing you, one rich meal and sweet wine at a time. So, Your life of divine indulgence came with its own set of morbid health issues. But beyond the earthly pleasures and pains, your true focus as Pharaoh was an all-consuming obsession with the afterlife. Every major decision, every grand construction project, and every intricate ritual was ultimately geared towards ensuring your eternal journey to the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, and your successful resurrection as an immortal god. Imagine spending your entire reign preparing for your death. From the moment you ascended the throne, your thoughts would be fixated on your tomb, your mummification, and the elaborate rituals that would secure your passage into eternity. You wouldn't just be building a pyramid or a rock-cut tomb, you would be constructing your eternal palace, a complex machine designed to protect your body, preserve your K life force and Bay soul, and provide all the necessities for your divine afterlife. It's like planning the most elaborate, multi-million-dollar funeral. But you're doing it your entire life, and your eternal existence depends on it. This obsession manifested in colossal architectural projects. Think of the pyramids of Giza, the Valley of the Kings, or the mortuary temples like Hatshepsut's at Deir el-Bahari. These weren't just impressive structures, they were incredibly expensive. Labor-intensive undertakings that consumed vast resources and human effort, all for the benefit of one person's eternal journey. You would personally oversee the design, the materials, and the craftsmanship, ensuring every detail was perfect for your divine resurrection. The construction crews, the skilled artisans, and the high priests were all working towards your ultimate goal, immortality. The mummification process itself was an elaborate, weeks-long ordeal. Your body would be meticulously preserved, organs removed and stored in canopic jars, and wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen bandages, all while specific prayers and rituals were recited. This wasn't just embalming, it was a sacred transformation, designed to make your physical form recognizable in the afterlife and capable of hosting your returning soul. Imagine people delicately removing your brain through your nose, definitely not a spa day. Your tomb would then be filled with an astonishing array of grave goods furniture, jewelry, clothing, food, and even miniature servant figures Shabtis designed to magically come to life and perform tasks for you in the afterlife. You wouldn't just be a god, you'd be a well-fed, well-dressed, well-attended god, prepared for every possible contingency in the spiritual realm. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this obsession is the sheer number and scale of royal tombs and mortuary complexes that dominate the archaeological landscape of Egypt. From the step pyramid of Djoser to the sprawling Valley of the Kings, these monuments are direct physical manifestations of the pharaoh's lifelong dedication to securing their eternal passage. Every stone speaks of their profound belief in and preparation for the next world. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some pharaohs had specific chambers in their tombs dedicated solely to storing bread, beer, and other foodstuffs, often depicted in wall paintings as being magically replenished forever. Imagine making sure your eternal picnic basket was always full, just in case you got hungry on your way to meet Osiris. It's a literal form of packing for eternity. Historians still argue whether the pharaohs' intense focus on their afterlife preparations was a genuine reflection of their personal piety and belief, or if it was also a strategic political tool used to legitimize their divine rule and impress their subjects with their immense power and connection to the gods. Was it true faith or brilliant statecraft regardless? Your life as pharaoh was a constant, grand rehearsal for your death, a meticulous preparation for a journey you hoped would never end. Your entire life was a meticulous preparation for death, and even after your passing, The mystique surrounding you continued, manifesting in what would become known as the curse of the mummy, while largely a modern sensationalized concept. The ancient Egyptian beliefs about the sanctity of royal tombs and the consequences of disturbing the dead were very real, and instilled a profound fear in those who might dare to violate your eternal resting place. Imagine your body, painstakingly preserved and entombed. The tomb itself wasn't just a burial chamber, it was a sacred space, protected by elaborate spells, magical texts inscribed on walls, and sometimes even physical traps, though these were more symbolic than practical. These protective measures weren't just for show. They were believed to be active deterrents, guarding your remains and your spirit from intruders. The fear of disturbing a pharaoh's eternal rest was deeply ingrained in the Egyptian psyche. It's like setting up the world's most elaborate security system, but for your corpse, and the alarm goes off in the afterlife. The belief was that if your tomb was desecrated, your mummy harmed, or your grave goods stolen, it could prevent your ka and ba from returning to your body, trapping your soul and denying you the blissful afterlife you had so meticulously prepared for. This was the ultimate catastrophe for a pharaoh. Therefore, anyone who dared to disturb your rest was inviting not just mortal punishment, but also divine retribution, curses from the gods, and eternal damnation. For the tomb robbers who, despite the warnings, invariably plundered royal graves throughout history, the fear of supernatural reprisal was a genuine concern. While they might dismiss it during the act of plunder, the legends of curses, inexplicable deaths, or misfortunes befalling those who defiled royal tombs would circulate and fester, growing into the modern myth of the mummy's curse. It's a bit like an ancient urban legend. But with actual mummies, even the ancient Egyptians themselves had a complex relationship with the idea of a disturbed grave. While they obviously desired their tombs to remain inviolate, the very existence of tomb robbers meant that sometimes they would rebury or move royal mummies to secret locations to protect them from such desecration. This effort speaks volumes about their genuine fear for the deceased's eternal well-being. One mainstream historical fact that feeds into the curse narrative is the unexplained deaths and illnesses among those involved in the excavation of Tutankhamun's tomb in the 1920s. While modern science attributes these to natural causes, e.g., exposure to ancient molds, gas, or simply correlation with already poor health, the sensationalist press of the time seized upon the idea of a pharaoh's curse. Fueling the myth, Lord Carnarvon, the financial backer, died shortly after the tomb's opening, adding significant weight to the public's belief in the curse. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some ancient Egyptian curses found inscribed on tombs were surprisingly specific, sometimes wishing for the transgressor to have no heir, to burn in the afterlife, or even to have their bodies denied proper burial rites, the ultimate Egyptian horror. Imagine a curse that's not just bad luck, but a meticulously detailed plan for your eternal suffering. It's like a passive-aggressive supernatural threat. Historians still argue whether the elaborate curses and perceived dangers of royal tombs were primarily intended as genuine magical deterrents, or if they were psychological tools meant to frighten potential robbers and protect the immense wealth contained within the burial chambers. Was it truly magic, or just very effective scare tactics regardless? Even in death, your presence as Pharaoh continued to cast a long, mysterious shadow, deterring or at least alarming those who dared to trespass. Your eternal rest, therefore, was carefully guarded, but your mortal life, despite its divine trappings, was far from perfect. In fact, if we could examine you today, the results might reveal some unsettling truths leading us to the hidden deformities and illnesses that plagued pharaohs, often surprising us with the realities of ancient royal health. Imagine stepping into a modern medical lab with your mummy. What secrets would your wrapped remains reveal, far from the idealized? Flawless images depicted in your statues and wall paintings. The skeletal and mummified remains of pharaohs have often revealed a surprising array of physical ailments, deformities, and chronic diseases. This reality sharply contrasts with the divine perfection you were expected to embody. It's like finding out your favorite superhero actually had a persistent cough and a dodgy knee. Many pharaohs showed signs of poor dental health. As we touched on earlier, you might have suffered from severe tooth decay, abscesses, and gum disease, causing excruciating pain and potentially leading to serious infections that could spread to your jaw or even your brain. Imagine ruling an empire with a throbbing toothache that no ancient remedy could truly alleviate. You'd likely be less inclined to smile for your official portraits. Evidence of arthritis is also common in royal mummies, particularly in the spine and major joints, suggesting that even a life of luxury didn't spare them from the wear and tear of physical existence, or perhaps the consequences of their sometimes sedentary yet ceremonial lives. Some pharaohs, like Siptah, have shown clear evidence of clubfoot or other significant limb deformities, forcing them to walk with a limp. This physical imperfection would have been a stark contradiction to their divine image, often requiring specialized footwear or careful positioning in artistic depictions to conceal it. Furthermore, parasitic infections were rampant in ancient Egypt, even among the elite, due to the prevalence of contaminated water from the Nile. Pharaohs, despite their clean environments, were still susceptible to diseases like schistosomiasis bilharzia, which could cause chronic fatigue, organ damage, and a host of debilitating symptoms. Imagine a living god plagued by microscopic worms. One mainstream historical fact that dramatically illustrates these hidden ailments is the extensive medical analysis performed on the mummy of Tutankhamun. Far from the romantic image of the boy king, studies revealed he suffered from malaria, a severe bone disorder, ocular disease descent, a fractured leg possibly due to a fall, and a club foot, likely due to a combination of genetic predisposition from his inbred lineage and a generally unhealthy environment. His gilded life was clearly one filled with pain and physical challenges. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some pharaohs showed evidence of having incredibly long, thin fingers or unusual skull shapes, leading to various speculative theories about inherited conditions or deliberate head shaping, though the latter is more common in other cultures. Imagine your royal portraits subtly distorting your appearance to meet a standard of beauty or divinity, while your real skull told a different story. It's a fascinating blend of idealization and reality. Historians still argue whether the physical ailments of pharaohs significantly impacted their ability to rule effectively, leading to periods of weakness or instability, or if their powerful public image and the strength of the bureaucratic system largely masked any personal infirmities. Did their pain hinder their reign? Or did they simply grin and bear it regardless? Beneath the linen bandages and golden masks, your divine body was often a testament to human frailty, a stark contrast to the perfect image you projected to your millions of subjects. Your body, for all its hidden flaws, was still a symbol, a vessel for divine power. But the gilded cage of the palace was also a dangerous arena, rife with political intrigue and assassinations. Despite your divine status and absolute power, the throne was a coveted prize, and many pharaohs faced plots, rebellions, and violent ends orchestrated by ambitious rivals, disgruntled officials, or even members of their own immediate family. Imagine the constant paranoia. Every vizier, every general, every priest, and indeed, every royal family member, your brothers, sisters, and even your own children could be a potential conspirator. Power in ancient Egypt was a zero-sum game, and the stakes were unimaginably high: the throne, immense wealth, and the very connection to the divine. You'd have to constantly assess loyalties, sniff out dissent, and eliminate threats, often with ruthless efficiency, before they could materialize. It's like being the main character in a historical thriller, but the bad guys are all in your own palace. Plots often involved attempts to assassinate the reigning pharaoh, either to seize the throne directly or to place a more pliable puppet in power. Poisoning was a favored method, subtle and difficult to detect in an age without forensics, daggers in the night, or even engineered accidents during hunts or ceremonies were also possibilities. You couldn't trust your food tasters, your closest advisors, or even the very people who shared your royal blood. The palace, for all its beauty, was a den of vipers. Succession was a particularly vulnerable period, when a pharaoh was old or ailing, or when a new, young ruler ascended. The vultures would circle, ambitious relatives or powerful court factions would jockey for influence, and if the opportunity presented itself, they might attempt a coup. The stakes were not just your life, but the lives of your family, your loyal supporters, and the very stability of the kingdom. One mainstream historical fact that provides a chilling example of this deadly intrigue is the harem conspiracy against Ramesses III, as we briefly touched on. Evidence from the Papyrus Judicial Turin shows a complex plot involving one of his secondary wives, Tiye, and her son, Pentawere, who sought to assassinate the pharaoh and place Pentawere on the throne. The plot involved not just palace officials but also members of the royal harem, highlighting the deep internal fissures within the royal household. Ramesses III eventually died from a cut throat confirmed by modern forensic examination of his mummy, strongly suggesting the plot was successful, at least in its deadly aim, even if the conspirators were later caught and brutally punished. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some pharaohs reportedly kept records of their dreams, often consulting dream interpreters, partly out of religious piety but also perhaps to gain insight into potential political threats or divine warnings about their safety. Imagine going to bed and wondering if your dreams might reveal your next assassin. It's a strange blend of spirituality and practical paranoia. Historians still argue whether the frequency of assassinations and violent successions in ancient Egypt was primarily due to the inherent instability of absolute monarchies, or if the unique divine nature of pharaonic rule made power struggles even more intense by raising the spiritual stakes of the throne. Was it just politics as usual? Or was divine kingship a particularly dangerous game regardless? As pharaoh, your golden crown was a constant target, and trusting the wrong person could cost you everything. So, the threat of assassination constantly lurked in the shadows of your magnificent palace. And speaking of palace life, another complex and potentially disturbing aspect of your reign involved the delicate management of your extensive royal harems and power dynamics. As pharaoh, you might have numerous wives, concubines, and royal children, creating a sprawling, intricate web of relationships, rivalries, and strategic alliances that required constant vigilance and skillful navigation. Imagine your family. It wasn't just you, your great royal wife, and a few children. A pharaoh's harem Ipet Nesut was a large institution, comprising secondary wives, concubines, and their offspring, often housed in a dedicated palace complex or a wing of the main palace. Each woman had her own status, her own retinue of servants, and often her own ambitions, especially concerning the future of her sons. It's like managing a very large, incredibly high stakes, and perpetually dramatic extended family, where everyone is vying for your attention and a piece of the pie. The primary purpose of having multiple consorts was to ensure a continuous line of succession and to forge political alliances. Marrying the daughters of foreign rulers brought diplomatic ties, while marrying women from powerful Egyptian noble families could secure their loyalty. However, this also meant you were constantly balancing the competing interests of different factions within your own household. Each wife's family would subtly, or not so subtly, try to advance her position and, more importantly, the position of her children, especially if one of them was a potential heir. The great royal wife, though paramount, wasn't immune to these power dynamics. While she held significant religious and symbolic authority, her position could still be challenged, particularly if she failed to produce a male heir, or if another consort gave birth to a particularly favored son. This created an environment of subtle and sometimes overt rivalry, whispered plots, and constant jockeying for influence among the women of the harem. Remember the harem conspiracy against Ramesses III. That was a direct result of these internal power struggles. Even your own relationship with these women would be less about personal affection and more about strategic management, while some pharaohs undoubtedly had personal favorites. Your interactions would be framed by royal protocol and the constant awareness of the political implications of your choices. Every gift, every visit, every public appearance with a particular consort could send ripples of hope or despair through the palace. One mainstream historical fact that illustrates the political importance of these relationships is the role of the great royal wife in religious rituals and the succession. She often held significant cultic power, participating in ceremonies as the female counterpart to the pharaoh's divine authority. Her children, especially if male, typically had the strongest claim to the throne. This meant that the selection and status of the great royal wife was a matter of paramount state importance, not just personal preference. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some pharaohs had favorite harem cities, or pleasure palaces, specifically designed for relaxation and entertainment with their various consorts. Imagine having a dedicated royal retreat, away from the main palace, solely for the purpose of unwinding with your many wives. It's like a luxurious ancient playboy mansion, but with more dynastic pressure. Historians still argue whether the royal harem primarily served as a source of political instability and conspiracy, due to the inherent rivalries, or if it was an essential tool for social control, allowing the pharaoh to manage noble families and foreign relations through marriage alliances. Was it a hotbed of intrigue, or a necessary political instrument? Regardless, as pharaoh, your personal life was deeply intertwined with statecraft, and your harem was a living, breathing chessboard of power, ambition, and dangerous secrets. So, your vast harem was a complex web of personal and political maneuverings. This leads us to another fundamental tension of your life as pharaoh, the stark contrast between your public display versus private reality. Every aspect of your existence was meticulously crafted for public consumption, projecting an image of divine perfection and unshakable power, while your private life was often a world of hidden anxieties, vulnerabilities, and human imperfections. Imagine your public appearances. You would always be presented as majestic, serene, and otherworldly. Your statues depicted you with an idealized physique, timeless youth, and an impassive, divine gaze. Wall paintings showed you triumphing over enemies, communing with gods, and effortlessly upholding Ma'at. You were never seen sweating, never stumbling, never showing fear or doubt. Every public procession, Every ceremonial act was a carefully choreographed performance designed to reinforce your divine status and inspire awe and reverence in your subjects. It's like living in a constant, meticulously directed reality show, where you are always playing the perfect, divine lead behind the scenes. However, your reality was far more mundane, and often far more human. We've already discussed the physical ailments, the bad teeth, the arthritis, the club foot. These imperfections, which would shatter the divine image, were carefully concealed. Your personal moments of weakness, fear, or frustration were hidden from public view, confined to the deepest chambers of the palace or witnessed only by your most trusted and often fearful attendants. You couldn't just have a bad day. A bad day for the pharaoh could be interpreted as a cosmic imbalance, threatening the very order of Egypt. Your personal anxieties, the pressure of maintaining Mayat, the constant threat of assassination, and the complexities of managing your vast court and harem would create an immense psychological burden. Yet, you had to maintain an outward calm, a divine stoicism. At all times, this constant performance, this suppression of your true feelings and physical discomforts, must have been exhausting. You were literally a prisoner of your own image. Even your death was a public spectacle, albeit a posthumous one. Your mummy, your tomb, and your mortuary cult continued the public display of your divinity, ensuring your eternal reign. The reality of your decaying body, or the struggle of your family to maintain the cult after your passing, would be kept secret. One mainstream historical fact that highlights this divergence is the discrepancy between idealized pharaonic sculpture and the actual physical characteristics of mummified remains. While statues depict powerful, youthful figures, the mummies often show signs of advanced age, dental problems, and various diseases. For instance, the mummy of Akhenaten, the heretic king, reveals a more frail and perhaps less ideal physique than his revolutionary art suggested. Showing a greater fidelity to reality than most royal portraits, a particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that royal scribes were tasked with meticulously recording every official act and decree, often omitting or reinterpreting events that might cast the pharaoh in a less than divine light. Imagine having a personal public relations team whose job was to ensure your historical record was always perfect, even if it meant conveniently forgetting your more human moments. It's a very ancient form of spin doctoring. Historians still argue whether the extreme emphasis on the pharaoh's perfect public image created a psychological burden that contributed to their mental or physical decline, or if it was simply a necessary function of maintaining control in an era where power was inextricably linked to divine authority. Was it a self-imposed prison, or a smart strategy regardless? As pharaoh, your true self was a closely guarded secret, a human being living within a meticulously constructed divine illusion. So, you were a human trapped within a divine image, navigating a world of public performance and private struggle. This immense burden brings us directly to the weight of divine responsibility. As pharaoh, you weren't just a king, you were the linchpin of the cosmos, believed to be personally responsible for maintaining Ma'at, the fundamental order of the universe. This wasn't a metaphorical burden, it was a constant, tangible pressure that shaped your every decision and likely weighed heavily on your soul. Imagine waking up every day knowing that the proper functioning of the entire world, as your people understood it, depended directly on you if the Nile didn't flood, bringing the life-giving silt for the crops. It was seen as your failing if a famine struck, or a plague swept through the land, or foreign invaders threatened the borders. It was a sign that Ma'at was out of balance, and you, the living God, were ultimately to blame. There was no escaping this responsibility. It's like being the captain of a spaceship, but if anything at all, goes wrong in the entire galaxy, it's all on you. This divine responsibility meant that every ritual you performed, every prayer you offered, every temple you built, and every decree you issued had cosmic implications. You were the mediator between humanity and the gods, the one who ensured the sun rose, the stars moved in their courses, and the very fabric of existence remained intact. This was not a symbolic role. It was believed to be an active, daily duty requiring your precise execution. If you messed up a prayer, did the gods hold back the flood? This kind of pressure would be immense. The pressure to constantly uphold Ma'at would undoubtedly lead to profound anxiety. You couldn't afford a moment of self-doubt or a public display of fear. Even in times of crisis, you had to project an image of unwavering confidence and divine connection, the stability of your kingdom, and the belief system that underpinned it rested entirely on your perceived perfection and efficacy in your divine role. Your decisions, therefore, weren't just political, they were theological. Going to war wasn't just a military strategy. It was a sacred act to restore order against chaotic foreign elements. Building a new temple wasn't just architecture. It was an act of piety designed to placate the gods and secure their continued favor for Egypt. Every action was imbued with this cosmic significance. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this divine responsibility is the Pharaoh's symbolic role as the primary builder of all temples, while architects and laborers did the actual work. Every temple was conceptually your personal offering to the gods, commissioned by you and bearing your name. This constant construction of sacred spaces was a physical manifestation of your continuous effort to maintain Ma'at and secure divine favor for your people. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some pharaohs would periodically perform a ritual called the Sed Festival or Jubilee, typically after 30 years on the throne. To symbolically renew their kingship and divine vigor, imagine having to undergo a physical and spiritual reboot ceremony every few decades, just to reassure everyone, including yourself, that you still had it. It's like a presidential re-election campaign, but with more ancient rituals and less handshaking. Historians still argue whether the concept of Ma'at primarily served as a genuine spiritual guiding principle for pharaohs, encouraging just rule, or if it was predominantly a powerful ideological tool used to justify their absolute authority and demand unquestioning obedience from their subjects. Did it truly guide them, or just control the masses regardless? As Pharaoh, the weight of the universe, in a very real sense, rested squarely on your slender, God-king shoulders. So, the cosmic weight of Ma'at pressed down on you constantly. This immense divine responsibility wasn't just a quiet inner burden. It was actively cultivated and broadcast through a sophisticated system of cult of personality and propaganda. As Pharaoh, you were a master of image, meticulously crafting your own narrative through art, architecture, and written decree to ensure unwavering public loyalty and to solidify your divine status. Imagine your brand. From monumental statues that dwarfed onlookers to intricate wall reliefs depicting your victories. Every piece of art commissioned during your reign was a carefully constructed piece of propaganda. You were always shown in the prime of life, perfectly proportioned, strong, and serene. Your enemies were always depicted as defeated, chaotic, and inferior. You were constantly shown smiting foes, receiving blessings from gods and presenting offerings, reinforcing your direct connection to the divine. There were no unflattering angles, no bad hair days, and certainly no candid shots of you looking anything less than utterly majestic. It's like being the subject of the world's longest-running, most elaborate photo shoot, where every single picture is heavily photoshopped. Your name, your titles, and your accomplishments would be inscribed everywhere on temple walls, on obelisks, on papyrus scrolls, and on every official document. These aren't just historical records, they were pronouncements, carefully worded to emphasize your power, wisdom, and divine favor. Scribes and priests worked tirelessly to ensure your narrative was consistent and pervasive, reaching every corner of your vast kingdom. You were building your own legend, ensuring that your legacy was exactly as you wished it to be. The construction of colossal monuments, like the temples at Karnak or Luxor, wasn't just about religious devotion. It was a powerful display of your wealth, your power, and your ability to command vast resources. These architectural marvels served as awe-inspiring symbols of your reign, silently proclaiming your greatness to all who beheld them. They were literal advertisements for your divinity. Even your chosen epithets and royal names were part of this strategic branding. You might adopt names that linked you directly to powerful gods like Rameses, meaning Ra is the one who bore him, or titles that emphasized your role as protector and unifier of Egypt. Every word, every symbol, was a carefully chosen element in your divine marketing campaign. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully exemplifies this cult of personality is the consistency of pharaonic iconography over millennia. Despite different dynasties and individual rulers, the basic artistic conventions for depicting the pharaoh, the specific poses, the regalia, the idealized physique remained remarkably consistent. This uniformity was not accidental. It was a deliberate strategy to reinforce the timeless, unchanging nature of pharaonic power and its divine origins, regardless of who was actually on the throne. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that pharaohs sometimes intentionally used archaic forms of language or artistic styles in their monuments to evoke a sense of ancient tradition and legitimacy, even if those styles were centuries old. Imagine trying to make yourself seem more legitimate by speaking in Shakespearean English today. It's a very ancient form of historical cosplay for political gain. Historians still argue whether the extensive pharaonic propaganda was genuinely successful in fostering widespread popular belief in the pharaoh's literal divinity, or if it was more effective as a tool for social control and state cohesion among a diverse population with varied local beliefs. Did people truly believe, or just obey regardless? As pharaoh, you were a master manipulator of perception, living a life that was as much a meticulously crafted narrative as it was a lived reality. Your true self was secondary to the grand, compelling story you continually told about yourself. So, your reign was a carefully constructed narrative, a constant performance of divine authority. But even this meticulously crafted image couldn't erase the early experiences that shaped you, leading us to consider the childhood trauma and early duties that were an inescapable part of growing up royal in ancient Egypt. From a tender age, your life was not your own, marked by immense pressure, rigorous education, and the crushing weight of your future destiny. Imagine your earliest memories. Unlike typical children, you wouldn't have had a carefree childhood filled with simple play from the moment you were recognized as a potential heir or even a royal child with a lesser, but still significant, destiny. Your education would begin. You would be immersed in religious doctrine, learning the intricate rituals, prayers, and myths that underpinned your divine status. You'd study hieroglyphs, state administration, military strategy, and perhaps even foreign languages, preparing you for the immense responsibilities that awaited. It's like being enrolled in the world's most demanding boarding school. But the stakes are the fate of an entire civilization. Your upbringing would be highly formal and probably quite lonely. While you'd have royal tutors and attendants, genuine friendships might be rare. Given the strict hierarchy and the political machinations that permeated the palace, you would be isolated, constantly observed, and expected to exhibit wisdom and self-control far beyond your years. There would be immense pressure to excel, to absorb vast amounts of knowledge, and to show no weakness. Imagine being a child, but knowing that the entire kingdom expects you to be a flawless god-king in training. Physical training would also be part of your regimen. You'd learn to ride chariots, hunt, and engage in mock combat, preparing you for your role as supreme commander of the army. These activities, while perhaps offering some physical outlet, were ultimately part of your duty, not just leisurely pursuits. Even your playtime would likely be structured and purposeful. The most profound trauma might be the constant awareness of your preordained path. There was no escaping your destiny. You were born to rule, born to be a god, and every moment of your childhood was a preparation for that inescapable role. This could lead to a deep sense of psychological burden, a loss of individual identity in favor of your divine office. Think of Tutankhamun, becoming pharaoh at around 9 years old. Imagine the weight on those young shoulders. One mainstream historical fact that highlights this rigorous early training is the existence of specialized royal academies, or House of the King's Children, where young princes and sometimes high-ranking noble children were educated together. This wasn't just informal tutoring. It was a structured environment designed to groom future leaders and ensure their loyalty to the crown. These institutions show the deliberate and intensive nature of royal childhood education. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that royal children sometimes had elaborate toys, like miniature chariots or dolls made of wood or ivory, often found in their tombs. While these offer a glimpse of childhood play, they also serve as a reminder that even their diversions were luxurious and distinct from common children. Imagine having a toy pyramid. Just to practice your future construction projects, it's a strange blend of privilege and preparation. Historians still argue whether the rigorous education and early exposure to statecraft instilled necessary discipline and competence in future pharaohs, or if it often resulted in emotionally stunted or rebellious rulers who struggled with the immense pressure placed upon them from birth. Did it forge great leaders, or just create deeply stressed individuals? Regardless, your childhood as a pharaoh was less about innocence and more about intense training, a relentless march towards an inescapable, divinely ordained, but heavy destiny. So, your childhood was a relentless training ground, forging you into the ruler you were destined to be. And once you were on the throne, you became acutely aware of the power of narrative, engaging in meticulous legacy and historical manipulation. As pharaoh, you didn't just rule, you controlled the very story of your reign, ensuring that your achievements were exaggerated, your failures minimized, and your enemies often erased from memory entirely. Imagine the historical record. It wasn't written by objective historians. It was largely created by your royal scribes, priests, and artisans, all under your direct command. If you won a battle, it would be depicted as a glorious, crushing victory where you personally slew thousands. Even if it was a minor skirmish or a strategic stalemate, if you built a grand temple, you would take credit for every stone, even if its foundations were laid by a previous pharaoh. Your name and cartouche would be carved over earlier inscriptions. Claiming credit for structures you didn't initiate, it's like having your own personal Wikipedia page, but you're the only editor, and you constantly rewrite history to make yourself look even better. Conversely, your failures or periods of weakness would be conveniently omitted or reinterpreted. If a famine occurred, it might be blamed on the gods' displeasure or foreign invaders, never on your misrule. If you suffered a military defeat, it would simply not be recorded, or spun as a strategic withdrawal leading to a future inevitable triumph. You could even erase entire pharaohs from history, especially those deemed illegitimate or heretical, like Akhenaten, whose monuments were defaced and his name systematically removed from official king lists. This was damnatio memoriae in action, an attempt to obliterate an individual's existence from human memory and the afterlife. This manipulation extended to your personal life as well. Any physical imperfections, as we discussed, were omitted from your statues. Any incestuous relationships, while accepted, were perhaps depicted in the most favorable light. The goal was always to present a flawless, divine image, both for your contemporaries and for all future generations. You were shaping eternity, one chisel mark at a time. This control over history was crucial for maintaining your divine legitimacy. If your subjects believed you were flawless and divinely favored, their obedience and faith would be strengthened. It also served to deter future rivals, demonstrating your power to control not just the present, but even the past and future narratives. One mainstream historical fact that dramatically illustrates this manipulation is Hatshepsut's rebranding as a male pharaoh, as a female ruler. Hatshepsut faced unprecedented challenges to her legitimacy, to solidify her rule. She often depicted herself with male physical characteristics, wearing a false beard and using male royal titles after her death. Later pharaohs, particularly Thutmose III, attempted to erase her from history, defacing her monuments and removing her name from king lists. A prime example of posthumous historical manipulation. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some pharaohs would even commission false autobiographical inscriptions, exaggerating their bravery or wisdom, to be placed in the tombs of favored officials, as if the official himself had written them. Imagine writing your own glowing review and then attributing it to someone else. It's a very ancient form of ghostwriting for ego. Historians still argue whether the extensive historical manipulation practiced by pharaohs was primarily driven by personal vanity and the desire for eternal glory, or if it was a pragmatic necessity for maintaining political stability and reinforcing the divine basis of their rule in a society without modern mass communication. Was it pure ego or clever governance? Regardless, your reign as pharaoh was a constant act of authorship, diligently writing and rewriting the story of your own immortal greatness. So, you carefully crafted your own historical narrative, ensuring your legacy shone brilliantly for eternity. But despite the mountains of evidence, the thousands of artifacts, and the meticulous records, a profound sense of the enduring mystery of kingship still surrounds ancient Egyptian pharaohs. For all our modern archaeological techniques and scholarly research, much about their personal lives, their true motivations, and the deepest intricacies of their divine role remains tantalizingly unknown. Forever veiled by the sands of time, imagine the gaps in our knowledge. We have their grand monuments, their carefully preserved mummies, and their official inscriptions. But what were their inner thoughts? What were their genuine feelings? Beyond the stoic facade, did they truly believe in their own divinity every waking moment? Or did they sometimes feel the heavy weight of imposture? We can infer much from their actions and their iconography. But the true emotional and psychological landscape of a pharaoh's private world remains largely inaccessible to us. It's like having an incredibly detailed instruction manual for a complex machine. but you'll never truly understand the mind of its designer. Even the precise details of daily palace life, beyond the broad strokes of protocol and ritual, are often elusive. What were their personal habits? What mundane conversations did they have? What jokes did they tell? These intimate human details, so central to our own lives, are mostly lost to the ages, overshadowed by the grand narrative of their divine office. We see the god, but the human often remains hidden. The motivations behind certain decisions also remain debated. Was a particular war truly for expansion, or for the pharaoh's personal glory? Or was it a desperate attempt to restore Ma'at in the face of perceived chaos? Was the construction of an unusually large tomb a sign of profound piety, or overwhelming insecurity? We interpret their actions through our modern lenses, but the full context of their ancient worldviews, their superstitions, and their personal beliefs can only be glimpsed. And perhaps this mystery is intentional. The pharaohs themselves cultivated an aura of otherworldliness, a deliberate distance between their divine selves and their mortal subjects. Their power was enhanced by the very inaccessibility of their true nature. They built their legacy to endure, but perhaps also to mystify, ensuring that, even millennia later, they would remain figures of awe and enigma. One mainstream historical fact that underscores this enduring mystery is the ongoing debate about the exact cause of death for many pharaohs, despite advances in medical forensics on mummified remains, definitively determining the precise ailment. Injury, or assassination method that ended many royal lives, remains challenging, with scholars often presenting competing theories based on subtle evidence. For example, while Ramesses III is widely believed to have had his throat slit, the specifics of how the plot unfolded and who delivered the fatal blow remain somewhat obscure. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that ancient Egyptian written records rarely contain personal diaries or candid correspondence from pharaohs. Unlike some later Roman or Greek leaders, their writings were almost exclusively official, ceremonial, or propaganda-driven, leaving little room for genuine personal expression. Imagine a ruler who leaves behind no personal thoughts, only meticulously crafted public statements. It's a deliberate act of self-effacement in favor of the divine role. Historians still argue whether the persistent mystery surrounding the personal lives and true thoughts of pharaohs is primarily due to the inherent limitations of archaeological evidence, or if it was a deliberate strategy of the pharaonic institution to maintain an impenetrable aura of divinity and control. Was it a lack of evidence, or a masterful act of concealment regardless? As our journey concludes, you are left not with definitive answers, but with the profound sense of a magnificent, disturbing, and ultimately unknowable presence, forever preserved in the golden silence of the desert. Now, let the whispers of ancient Egypt, the rustle of papyrus, and the distant echo of a pharaoh's name gently fade into the soft hum of your surroundings. The gleaming gold and the imposing stone monuments are receding, becoming indistinct images in your mind's eye. There's no more heavy crown, no more fear of intrigue, no more divine burdens to carry here. Just the gentle rhythm of your own breath, the warmth of your blanket, and the quiet comfort of your room. You can release the weight of those ancient histories, knowing that the past is distant, and your present is safe and peaceful. Drift now, deeply and peacefully. End of script, sweet dreams.